The London Chess Classic 2015 is a very tight tournament. Games are being decided by very fine margins, and I'm going to show you two games from round 6 that I think illustrate that very well. First of all, the game between Veselin Topalov and Micahel. Topalov, playing white, has a pretty pleasant position. He's got a nice clump of pawns on the king side, and if he could get the f-pawn rolling, things will be pretty good. He also has pressure on the c6 pawn, so the c and d pawns of Adams not really any threat. Topalov has just played his rook over to c2, so threat, rook takes c6, and now Adams played, well, a seemingly natural rook on the back rank up to a6 to protect that pawn. He could have and probably should have protected it with the other rook, or perhaps by playing rook c8, because now Topalov played knight d4, attacking the pawn. Adams went back with the knight, and now out of the blue black is losing material. Suddenly Adams realized there was no defense. So the knight coming in c5 with a forking something. Well, Adams moved the queen away. The knight came in, and black is just losing an exchange here. But that wasn't quite the end of the game. Adams struggled on. He moved one of the rooks back. Toppy took the rook, so it's a clear exchange up. Now this pawn is threatened, so Topalov defended it. Now, you'd think with even pawns, clear exchange up, this ought to be pretty simple technical win for white. But watch how Adams defends himself. It's very impressive. First of all, he lashed out with g5. Now, it looks very risky to move a pawn up in front of your king. In fact, this has a very sound positional basis. After Topalov exchanged, you can see that the pawn on e5 is much weaker. Of course, it's double-edged, it's a gamble, because black's king is also a bit weaker. But with the queen and the knight here, things aren't too bad. It's not an easy position to convert this, actually. And one of the problems is that white's king is somewhat exposed. If I could just pull those pawns back to f2 and g2, then this would be a very simple win. But the king is somewhat exposed. Topalov played rook e1. There are other moves there, possibly queen e3 is stronger, but okay, rook e1 played, looks very natural, and after knight g6, he pushed on with the e-pawn and took on c6. Now, it looks as though white has made significant progress in this position, because he's managed to trade off a couple of pawns, activate his rooks, open up black's king even more. Well, I can see why Toppy went in for this. It just looks such a natural way for white to play. But then came knight e5. Now the knight attacks the rook and the pawn on f3. It looks like another deadly fork, but the rook just steps away from the knight, gives a check. Still a threat here, but Topalov defended with rook f1. And it seems as though white still has everything under control. But Adams took the pawn. Well, white has to take the knight off. And Topalov now played queen c2. And he must have thought this was a winning position. The queen threatens a deadly check on h7, a deadly check on c7, and, well, it keeps an eye on the rook, although that rook can't actually be taken because of a perpetual check. But those two moves are the real threats, queen h7 or queen c7. But remarkably, Adams has a defense. King g7, a very subtle move. So obviously queen h7 impossible. And if queen c7, the queen simply blocks. And if rook c7 check, the king only has one safe square, and that's f6, but that's quite good enough. And now, well, there's actually no more attack, incredibly. So in this position, well, Topalov could only find queen takes rook, and Adams made a draw by perpetual check. Well, Adams got out of jail there, but very nice defense, creating as many problems as possible for Topalov. Now, let me show you another game. Alexander Grischuk against Viswanathan Anand. Now, we joined the game just after Grischuk has made his 40th move. He was in time pressure as ever, but not so serious. Grischuk was better for most of this game, slightly better. And at move 40, Anand wasn't in time pressure, but he had a tricky decision to make. Anand with black is a pawn down. Now, there are various ways that black could try and defend this position, but it's very hard to judge which is the best of these poor endgames. You can see that rook threatens the pawn here. You could push on with g4 and then take on d4, and white takes on c6. This bishop looking pretty good on the long diagonal, certainly preventing black's bishop getting into the game. Anand declined to play that one. You could play bishop d5, looks pretty nice, but then rook a5 and the a pawn is going to drop. Or what else is there? King f6 doesn't look bad, but then, well, f4 is possible, and in this position, well, white is a very safe pawn up, but it's possible for black to play like that. Instead, Anand just hacked the pawn on d4. Rook takes g5 check. King came to f6. Now a nice move, rook f5 check. King doesn't really want to come this way. Could well be, there could be some check when you take the a pawn. King came to g6, but now the rook switched, and it's nice to have the king on a light square. Sometimes it can be important to give a check. But Grischuk has a choice here. You could try rook a5, but in this position, well, black certainly has counterplay here. It's not completely clear. White could still struggle on like this, but somehow, yeah, it's not nice to have the king cut on the 7th rank. Let's go back. Anyway, Grischuk tried rook c5. So white still a pawn up, and that bishop comes to d5, threatening a mate. So bishop g2. And now we reach a rook on pawn ending. Grischuk said after the game that at this stage he still had no idea whether this was winning for him or drawing. One thing is certain, Anand was moving pretty quickly, and that d-pawn provides black with pretty serious counterplay here. White 2 pawns up, but that pawn is well supported and, well, further advanced than any of white's pawns. But now the b-pawn rolls, and the a-pawn too. And here it's pretty certain that Anand made a fatal mistake. His best chance lies in playing d3. And, well, I've looked at this for a little bit, and I can't say for certain that this is a win for white. Pretty good chances. Let's put the rook behind the pawn. You know, maybe something like this. An f4, but it's not a certain win. In any case, it was better than king d3. This definitely loses. It was already, they were already into the fifth hour, about 5th hour of play, yeah. Certainly in the 5th hour of play. Maybe they played about 5 hours by this moment. So another tough day But this is definitely winning for white. All Grischuk needs to do was keep pushing the b-pawn. Here Anand resigned. If rook b4, rook has to stay behind that pawn, otherwise the rook moves away and you make a queen. And now all you need to do is push the f-pawn. Remember, if the king steps to the side, then you could always give a check and queen. I mean, black's king can shuffle down the board, but it's too slow. This f-pawn is rolling down the board. And here, well, white wins the race. So as I said, fine margins deciding these games. And, well, if we look at the scoreboard now, there with that win, Grischuk goes into joint first place. There are now 4 players with 3.5 out of 6. Karu Nakamura, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, Anish Giri and Alexander Grischuk. On 50%, Carlson, Aronin, Caruana, Adams, and the 2 back markers, Anand 2.5 out of 6, Topalov 1.5 out of 6.